Right, I don't know what happened to my intro there. StreamYard.
Right, I don't know what happened to my intro there.
Oh. Any more problems with StreamYard? I don't think I'm ever going to use it again. But there you are. That's just me. Yeah, I'm going to share screen. The StreamYard link is pinned there. I don't know if any of you are going to try and come in. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? I'm not desperate. I've been watching a couple of videos. I haven't watched this one. The title caught me interest. I noticed Sam doing a video on a pig. Well, actually, one pig doing an AI skit of East Max for the benefit probably of the pod team, those pigs. So it's a sort of trinity of pigs, isn't it? Pig Sam doing a video on another pig, East Max, for the benefit of a trio of pigs on the pod channel. Yeah, free grand. I've uploaded some recordings, made a few observations on there. I mean, the hypocrisy of those people on the pod team, it stinks. And dude lying again about what he said to Dave. He actually blamed News Unit for the death of his mother. I was there. I heard it. Fact. I'm not white knight for News Unit or any of you. So yeah, like it or lump it. Yeah, I'm not worried. Let's have a listen to this one for 5 minutes. I'll put a link in so you know to have a look, so you can go and watch it yourself.
It's more deadly than COVID. This is a deal you probably have never heard of. No idea what the hell I'm talking about.
Let me start it right from the very beginning.
229,000 people could die as a result of this deal with the Trump administration in Britain. That's 229,000 excess deaths, more deadly than COVID. This is a deal you probably have never heard of. No idea what the hell I'm talking about. And it's a deal which is about pharmaceutical companies in the US, Donald Trump, and it's about the very future of our National Health Service and people's lives. Oh, this is crazy. Sorry, I just want to make that clear. This is really actually quite terrifying stuff. We do need to talk about this properly. I'm really delighted to be joined by Diarmuid MacDonald, who's the director of Just Treatment.
I knew what Trump was about 2 or 3 months before. I'd never Googled it and checked it up and sort of researched it, if you can call it that. But when I found out he was running for president, I thought, yeah, I'll have a look at this guy. Been to Jesuit University, his favourite pastor is Norman Vincent Peale. And yeah, he has been to Jesuit University, same as Biden, and then he went to another one after 2 years. Trump is, well, you know anyway, you don't need me to. You go and work it out yourself. He's a Roman Catholic, essentially. He's no Christian. And I say that because I don't acknowledge the Roman Catholic so-called church as being biblical Christianity. And that's just me. Oh yeah, Tom, if you're listening, you half-wit bastard. Calling me a gatekeeper, I've never thought any such thing at all. Pointed out your lies a couple of times and you didn't like it. Did you? So all of a sudden you call me a gatekeeper. You can't even make your mind up about Stephen Anderson. Do you follow him or not? I mean, make your mind up. You support Stephen Anderson. This is what he said, 6 or 7 months ago. Took me 20 minutes to find out from Standing for Truth and his classy channel. He supported Stephen Anderson. It took him 20 minutes to answer. And yeah, you still support Stephen Anderson, don't you? Apparently. I mean, who knows? It was only, a month ago that you were slagging off the new independent fundamentalist Baptists. If only you'd make your mind up, and I'm not so sure that you're capable. You are a disgusting individual. I don't know whether you're saved or not. I hope not. I mean, seriously, I say that because I'm not sure I'm all that keen on meeting you in heaven. Well, there you go. Green Grace. And your hypocrisy has been noticed. I noticed it. Hopefully others did. Yeah. Gatekeeper. Dude, you are a liar. East Max is big-headed. I wouldn't give him the time of day. He thinks he's in charge of people, that guy. Thinks he's got everybody nailed down or something. I don't know. Who cares? Okay, let's play some more of this. Hope you're all having a good day, by the way. Stop doing that. I didn't even want the screen enlarging. Bloody hell.
Hello, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good, thanks.
Right. This is quite alarming, actually, if I'm honest. Can you just explain, for a lot of people who would just clicked on this video now and gone, what is happening? Can you explain what is this UK-US pharma deal? What's basically, what does it do, and why it matters to ordinary NHS patients who have no idea what I'm talking about?
Yeah, thanks, Owen. So people may have noticed over the course of last year, there was a steady drumbeat of threats, basically, from pharmaceutical companies saying they were going to quit the UK, saying that they were going to pull investment in the British economy, saying that they were no longer sure it was worth launching drugs in the UK because prices were not high enough. And you will have also potentially heard Donald Trump complaining that, everybody was freeloading off the back of American
because we have checks on
healthcare spend on medicines, and that
they have the what do they call it, FDA over there. They're very lax on testing and all that kind of thing. They're not so lax over in this country, although our government is just as despicable. And the NHS, they're a bunch of baby murderers, really. So is America. Legalized what I would call genocide. Yeah. But anyway, there you go. I don't want any American organisations in this country organising our healthcare system because it's garbage over there. They don't give a stuff about you over there. And there are some Americans I've seen on YouTube. I mean, I don't hate every American. I don't. I'm not even sure I hate any Americans. I just don't like the stupidity and the mental incapacity that like 80% of them seem to have. A lot of them can't read. Anyway, that's just my opinion.
very coordinated pressure was being exerted by the US and by the pharmaceutical industry to try and force the UK government's hand. Basically, we've got very, very effective controls on drug prices. So the NHS is the only show in town. If you want to sell drugs in the UK, you got to sell to the NHS. And so, you know, it's not been a perfect system, but we've done a pretty good job of keeping a lid on the amount of money we spend on medicines. And everybody understands the alternative to that is what you see in the US with, you know, bankruptcy and deep health injustice. And the pharmaceutical companies hate that. They hated the fact that we were very good at keeping their profits in check.
I'm glad they hate
And
it.
so they saw this opportunity with the Trump administration to try and do something about that. And so over the course of the last year, they put pressure on the UK government, which ultimately ended in the UK signing a deal with the US administration, which commits the UK to significantly increasing the amount of money we spend on medicines within the NHS. And there's a lot of detail within that, but that's the basic summary. And so the reality is when the NHS is already on its knees, when it's been underfunded for more than a decade, it's been privatized, and it's been undermined, we know that if we suddenly increase the amount of their NHS budget that goes on medicines, that money needs to come from somewhere. Now, the government has said that money is not going to come from the Treasury. There's not going to be any new money to the NHS budget to cover this cost. So we're going to have to take money from other parts of the NHS to put it into the back pockets of Big Pharma. And when you take that money...
Yeah, just to be clear then, so the British Medical Journal analysis of this deal suggests £44.7 billion being diverted from other NHS care by 2036. So what are we talking here? For your doctors, for your scans, logger weights, for your operations, like what does that materially mean? £44.7 billion in the next few years?
It's extreme. Like, we talk about, the cost of kind of like settling fair pay packages for doctors and nurses was in the low billions, right? We're talking about like 1, 2, 3 billion to give like health workers a fair pay packet. And the government said that was too expensive. If we look at the underspend in terms of hospital building, in terms of upkeep of in the hospital estate, in terms of the construction of new bed capacity, in terms of the social care budget, like all of those kinds of critical investments, what the government has said aren't possible, there isn't enough money to do it. None of those come anywhere close to the scale of expenditure that we're say that we're committing to give to the pharmaceutical industry in this deal. And so, as the BMJ analysis shows, and that's not just, that's a couple of three very highly respected health and access to medicines and health economist experts using the government's own data have said that this translates into over 200,000 extra deaths that would be otherwise avoided if that medical bill was kept as it currently is. And so we're basically allowing people to die to please Donald Trump and to inflate the profits of Big Pharma.
229,000 excess deaths. I mean, that's these, as you say, these.
And that's England alone. That's just England. More in Scotland, more in Wales, more in Northern Ireland. You factor in the costs that this, the implication of this for social care, and the numbers go up to just under 300,000. And again, that's just for England. This is huge, like nearly double the number of deaths in COVID. And it's basically a voluntarily chosen pandemic that the government have signed us up for as a geopolitical strategy to please Donald Trump and to please the pharmaceutical industry. It's a scandal.
Can you just explain? I mean, who are just so everyone's clear, so people don't think this is just, figures plucked out of nowhere. Can you just explain who the experts are who came up with this figure and how have they arrived at that figure in rough terms? So two of the main authors, so Andrew Hill is a long-standing expert and respected academic who's done a bunch of work historically over like 20 years or more about medicine pricing and access to medicines globally. He's played a really important role around access to Hep C and HIV treatment. Historically, he's pioneered some research methodology that tries to really unpick how much medicines should cost and how much drug companies are charging and the discrepancy between the two. So a really respected figure at the University of Liverpool. And then Carl Claxton is the other kind of senior author of this. He actually has been heavily involved since the very creation of NICE. This is this body that determines whether a medicine is cost effective and whether or not it should be used on the NHS. He's been at the heart of the development of the UK's price control mechanisms for nearly 30 years, more, 40. And so really heavily respected health economist, globally renowned for his work. And so these aren't cowboys. These are not like
lefty radicals. These are people who've got credentials, who've been respected by government over many years for the kind of veracity and the accuracy of their research. And they've basically looked at this and said, okay, how much does it cost to save a life right now, on average, in the UK? So when the NHS spends money, on average, you are able to buy a certain amount of health for a certain amount of money. And they've used those very, very well-established methodologies to calculate, okay, well, we know how much on average it costs to save a life, or to add one quality, like a quality adjusted life year. And I'll try to avoid the jargon, but basically you can buy a certain amount of health for a certain number of pounds. And so if you end up taking a bunch of money out of that kind of general NHS budget and explicitly ring fence it to double the amount of money that we're spending on these very overpriced medicines, there's an opportunity cost there. And that opportunity cost, in this case, over the 10 years of the deal, is going to translate into over 200,000 extra deaths, because we could have bought health. We could have done a better job treating cancer. We could have done a better job of getting people seen by A&E more quickly. We could have done a better job of preventing respiratory conditions or heart attacks, all those kinds of other cost-effective interventions. We're going to have to sacrifice to spend more money on drugs that translate into poorer overall health outcomes.
And people can use their common sense. Every £1 billion spent on health saves lives. Thus, every billion taken away from healthcare takes away lives. Just obvious, basic common sense.
And we're already spending over the odds.
Well, you know what I say to the USA? F the USA. Couldn't care less what you think of that. Think what you want. I don't want to know what your thoughts are. Oh, no thanks. You can prove your love. Yes. 250 years of liberty. When's that going? Who's that supposed to be?
Hey everybody, it's your friend Jason here.
I'm not your friend. Hold on, let's just clear one thing up. I haven't heard this video yet. I'm not your friend. You don't decide who my friends are. None of you do. Anyway, let's carry on. I'll try not to interrupt unless you say something totally stupid or something.
We're going to be talking about the 250th anniversary of the United States of America, or at least the 250th anniversary since the Declaration of Independence. Of course, an anniversary of this size, of this magnitude, you're going to have the fireworks, you're going to have the parades and the patriotic songs and all that stuff. And I love all of that stuff. Don't get me wrong. I love the story of our nation's founding. And that
include,
America
does that include the genocide of First Nation people? Only asking. I'll just post a link to this garbage in there. It's there anyway.
Extraordinary blessings from God, but of course, those extraordinary blessings do come with extraordinary accountability. And so the question before us today is not whether so much America has been great. I think it has been, although imperfect. But I want to consider what Christians specifically, what we have done with the liberty that we've had during this.
You've genocided as many countries as you've been involved with in terms of war and other stuff. First Nation people. I mean, there's a long list. You know, oh, true. You Americans have got big ideas about your own country. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a POS. I wonder if it was free grace then when they were doing genocide, because they're not convicted of sin, don't forget. I mean, bear that in mind, you know. They have said so, haven't you, dude? Apart from the lies that you've told about people. Yeah. Blaming news unit for his mother's death. Yeah. Yeah, you did. I was there. I heard you. Seen the videos. I've probably got the recording of it somewhere. Anyway. Dearie me.
Period. And whether we've used it for good and godly purposes, or whether or not we've mostly consumed it upon ourselves. And of course, I believe that's really what has happened, given the state of our country today. But I want to go back to the beginning of America. All right, we're going to go all the way back to the colonial times, 1651, where Baptist ministers John Clark, Obadiah Holmes, and John Crandall were arrested in Massachusetts after gathering for worship in a private home. Now, Obadiah Holmes was eventually stripped and publicly whipped because he would not allow others to pay for his fine, thereby implying that preaching the gospel was somehow a crime, which back, of course, in those days it really was, because you had the state church. I believe those were Anglican churches, the Church of England, right? And only state-sanctioned churches with their authority structure could actually publicly carry out their religion, their faith. But Obadiah Holmes didn't believe that way.
Didn't the history of America go a little bit further back? You know, Columbus. After Columbus had committed his genocides on his little boat out in is it the Pacific or the Atlantic, one or the other, coming from Spain and stuff. Yeah. I mean, that looks like, what year did he say that was? 1700s? Yeah, they'd been there they'd been there about 100 years or so already by then, murdering as many people as they could get the paws on, especially Native Indians, First Nation people. Yeah, the hypocrisy of this guy. I wonder what he's going to get into.
He thought that anybody should be free to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, and he wasn't going to bow down to the state, and so he was whipped for that. Now, more than a century later after that, Baptist preachers in Virginia were still being jailed, still being beaten, and still being persecuted for preaching without authorization from the state-established church. You had men such as John Waller and Lewis Craig, who did not believe that Christ's command to preach required some permission from some magistrate somewhere.
Never heard of them.
Their position, of course, being that civil government had absolutely no authority to dictate worship, control the church in any way, determine who can...
Well, they just left that situation. Well, not them, obviously. On the Mayflower and other ships. To leave that Roman Catholic stuff behind in England. They just didn't want... Well, a lot of stuff putting on the neck.
Free to proclaim the gospel. That conviction, though, did come at a real cost. And the liberty that we have inherited was strengthened by such men who were willing to suffer and die rather than
liberty to do what?
That the government possessed some sort of authority that the Lord Christ never gave it. All right. Meanwhile, then you had Baptist preachers such as Shubal Stearns and Tidance Lane, who were carrying the gospel through the southern backcountry. Many churches were planted. They were calling sinners to repentance. Whole communities were influenced by their preaching, especially because they were pledging allegiance to Jesus Christ, even above allegiance to human institutions such as the government. These men were not trying to build a religious subculture. They were trying to establish churches. They were telling people how to be born again, proclaiming that new birth in places where spiritual darkness and civil oppression often went hand in hand. Now, many Baptists also supported the cause of American independence. Ministers such as John Gannot, David Jones, and Hezekiah Smith served as chaplains or ministered among American forces. After the Revolution, Baptists continued pressing for the liberty of conscience, and John Leland joined many Virginia Baptists in insisting that religious liberty had to be protected against government intrusion.
11 hours.
Now, these men, here's the thing about these men. These men didn't ask the government to declare that the Baptist faith be a state-established church. They didn't ask for special privileges against any above any other groups, right? All they were doing was asking the government to acknowledge that it had no authority to compel faith in any way whatsoever. That distinction is essential. It is absolutely key, because coerced state religion may produce some level of outward conformity, but it can never produce the inward conversion of the heart. And that is, of course, what matters. Now,
it sounds like free grace a little bit there, trying to coerce people. They're even trying to imply, I'll say that, I'm being charitable, that a guy called Sparkle became free grace before he died. Oh dear. What a reach. Anyway, there you go. Let's just play the rest of this.
If you want to learn more about these guys, I want to share with you some book titles that are going to be a help to you. And I'll try and include Amazon links down below where I can. The first book I want to recommend is by a friend of mine, Bill Delperdange. This book is titled Three Men, the Baptists and American Liberty. And that is about Shubal Stearns, Samuel Harris, and John Leland. And so you can learn about those guys. I highly recommend that book. It's a short read.
Oh, I'm bored. I mean, this guy is just, is either completely oblivious to history, and I'm not an expert on history. I love church history, though. And this, I suppose, is part of it. I'm going to have a look at the history of what I watched, because I tried to play it the other day. And, yeah, why Americans are so stupid. Well, it's one obvious thing. Oh, look, there's Isaac. Bony Finger, yeah, me thumbnail. That's my channel then. I'll just type the word stupid in. And then should find that other video. I didn't tag me live stream, so nobody's come over. I ain't worried. How we ended up raising the stupidest generation. There, look.
What grows the economy?
How we ended up being
Me.
We're investing in skills and training programs across the UK that help people grow, because people grow the economy, and growing the economy is our business.
This professional 32 TW SSD, capable of holding the entire collection of the New York Public Library, is something you won't find at Best Buy or any electronics retailer, even if you were willing to drop $1,000.
When critical thinking dies, collective stupidity naturally rises. In such a world, everyone is convinced they are right, and everyone else is wrong. Opinions grow louder than logic, and emotions grow stronger than evidence. But the real question is, why does this happen?
I did watch.
Why is critical thinking dying faster in our time than ever before?
Yeah, just spread it all out everywhere. It's bad enough in America. It's bad in America. Let's just go back. I've heard that one, and I understand it. There's no critical thinking taught in schools, in this country or in America. But genuinely, they do seem to be stupider in America. Oh, is this it? Yeah. Oh, true. I tell you what, if I was, I'm not going to say that. I don't want to be rude to it. I wasn't going to be rude. I was just going to say, I love women like this. Ones that have got backbone. She's Australian, by the way. Is it Australian or New Zealand?
Make your browser fast.
Oh, sorry about the ad. There's nothing I can do about it. I can't get rid of it.
Make your browser
Tell you
safe.
what, I'm not paying to get rid of it.
Make your browser
Oh,
Chrome.
wait. Why should I? Seriously, though, they want you to pay to avoid all the ads.
A collateral damage of
They want you to pay. I'll put a link to this in. To not see adverts. Why do I have to pay to do that? Why should I? They're going to make money either way. Forget that. Oh, even if it was only £2, I wouldn't pay. I wouldn't pay that. Anyway, dude, you need to stop lying about people, and especially about the things that you've said to News Unit. Absolutely disgusting individual. I was there, I heard all that stuff. So you can't lie to me about it. Not that you were talking to me, but there you go.
your unregulated capitalism and your bought legislator. Your country starts all these bloody wars, often just for shits and giggles. The villain.
Yeah, that well, it's not funny. That pig there and the rest of the so-called presidents. Oh, I mean, I could tell you a ton. Well, at the moment, I couldn't tell you a ton of stuff about them. I could have done a year or so ago because I looked into all this filth, these filth. And it's not the American people, it's their government. They're making their own people look like garbage. And they are, mostly, because they're dumb. They're stupid. And yeah, I mean, that's why I call people stupid. It's not because I'm trying to be rude, right? I genuinely believe that, I mean, everybody, apart from Ben, because Ben isn't stupid, actually. But every American I've been in a conversation with on YouTube is essentially unbelievably stupid, or they just can't read. I know what America and Britain has done. We're not much better. They start a war, then like with Iran, and they expect everybody else to come and join in. Well, you can F off with that. I don't even want Americans in this country, military or otherwise. I don't want any of you here. Just the English and the Scots and the Welsh and the Cornish and maybe some people from Portsmouth. I don't know if Portsmouth is actually part of England, really. I don't know.
Idiot is president and it is landing on us. Our farmers cannot afford to run their equipment. We are paying in real money for an education system that was broken on purpose hundreds of years ago that is not ours. You are exhausting. You are genuinely, relentlessly, completely exhausting. We did not choose to become experts on American politics and American shootings, American culture wars and American grief. Yeah, let's go back a few.
Yeah, I mean, Americans are exhausted. You can't get anything through to them. They're either obtuse or rampantly ignorant. And yeah, I know I'm not the sharpest tool in the box. I just don't want to be in the American box. I'll put some red dots next to this. I hope you'll go and check it out for yourself. You don't have to watch it while I'm playing it on my channel, obviously. Put some red dots next to it. I do apologise for interrupting this. I've just had to listen to this one again. It's so true of most education systems in Europe, USA. I don't know about the non-European countries. They might teach you in critical thinking, logic and all that kind of thing in Russia. I don't know. Honestly, I do not know. Latin American countries, I would have doubts about that because they're mainly Roman Catholic. the Roman Catholics don't want you to have critical thinking skills, because thinking is critical. When Roman Catholics start I'm sure a lot of them are realise that Roman Catholicism is just a load of hokum. I'm not going to get into that anyway. I could do. I used to do a lot of stuff on Roman Catholicism. I genuinely think that America, the way it's coming across, is just a massive paedophile, baby murdering cult. And the Free Grace channel, which I referred to, I'm not going to name it. I wouldn't encourage anybody to go there, really. I mean, they'll lie about you. They'll say, oh yes, grace. And then they show no grace by playing a clip of me. Yeah, I was angry. I was annoyed. I shouldn't have said what I said to Veckel. Very unfortunate. I regretted it. I apologised to Veckel at least 3 times. He accepted my apology. I just had to sort of not re-apologise, just make sure he knew that I regretted saying what I'd said. I don't hate the guy. Maybe he is annoying now and again. I don't hate the guy. But anyway, that you know, if you want to comment, don't worry, you won't lose your salvation. Although if you're a free gracer, you might well do. And yeah, I could say some stuff about
200 years, and let me explain how we got to this. For our regular viewers, this video is going to be a departure from our usual death-related content, but as you will have noticed, critical thinking is something we strongly advocate on this channel, and that is exactly what this video is about. It is for everyone who has ever asked themselves, does the US even have an education system? Is it optional? It is for everyone who sees the brain rot coming out of the US day after day and genuinely wondering why. It is for everyone asking how a nation of 335 million people ended up with the biggest village idiot on the planet as president. Yeah. Since that brain rot is now affecting our kids and that village idiot is actively affecting our lives, many of us outside the US are demanding an explanation. I too wanted an answer to these questions, and since I love to research anything and everything, this became the rabbit hole that...
Let's be charitable here. Yeah, maybe a lot of Americans are expecting an explanation. There may be people who have studied and, you know, learned critical thinking, logic, all that kind of stuff, philosophy, if you want to call it that. Most Americans aren't even questioning it, which is what essentially makes them stupid. They don't examine their own beliefs. Free gracers don't either. Oh dear. They don't even hear their own inconsistency, their hypocrisy. There you go. What do you do? Well, I mean, you can pray for them, pray about them. I wouldn't want to force somebody into realizing anything, you know, truth or any, you know, I really wouldn't. You know, this is why, I mean, Sam is whinging. He's done a shorts video on me calling everybody dunces. Taken out of context, of course. Most of the people I've communicated with on YouTube are dunces in one way or another. They ask the most stupid questions. They're totally oblivious to the garbage that's being fed to them, and I see them as actually being stupid. I'm not the great shakes at logic and critical thinking. I do think about stuff. Right. But anyway, I'm genuinely trying not to interrupt this. Oh, stop doing that.
That I went down over the past few months. What I found is too important not to share, and it's a 250-year-old story. The first half of this video explains to the international community how America got itself into this mess, and the second half explains to Americans why the international community is done being diplomatic about how we feel about it. Buckle up, it's going to be a long, bumpy ride.
Yeah, go on, love. I mean, she is
Part 1. What is critical thinking and why does it matter?
Yeah.
Since that is what this video is essentially about, let's define it. Critical thinking is not about being clever or contrarian or difficult. It is the ability to evaluate a claim before accepting it.
Yeah.
To ask where that information comes from,
Oh dear.
who benefits from you believing in it, whether that evidence actually supports the conclusion, and whether you would accept the same argument if it came from the other side. It is, at its core, the ability to change your mind when the evidence demands it. That is it. That is the whole thing. When a population lacks critical thinking skills, the consequences are not abstract. People cannot identify when they are being lied to. They cannot distinguish between a credible source and a fabricated one. They make medical, financial, and political decisions based on what feels true rather than what is demonstrably true. They are easy to manipulate, easy to sell to, easy to frighten, and easy to turn against each other. They vote against their own interests. They trust the people who are harming them. They distrust the people who are trying to help them. And they can be convinced that all of the above is actually freedom. Every single thing this video covers, the school system, the media, the exported dysfunction, the slide towards authoritarianism, is what happens without this skill as part of your culture. Keep that in mind as we go forward. One more thing before we go further, because someone will make the comment if we don't bring it up. This video is not arguing that Americans are stupid. 335 million people have the same range of intelligence as any other population on Earth, the same distribution of IQ, the same capacity for brilliance, the same capacity for analytical thought. Some of the most rigorous thinkers, scientists, journalists, and critics in the world are American. What this video is arguing is that a system was deliberately built to prevent a very, very large portion of the population from developing and using the skills of critical thinking, self-awareness, and emotional intelligence, and that is a very different claim. And if you genuinely think all Americans are stupid, you are clearly deficient in critical thinking skills yourself, so you might not want to throw stones. Part 2, the founding.
Well,
let's start with a statement that sounds provocative, but is...
Yeah, she's right there. I mean, in relation to other people and their sort of, we can just call it intelligence, emotional intelligence, IQ, whatever you want to call it. Of course, there's people a lot cleverer than I am. There's always somebody who's sharper, who's done the degrees and all that. Yeah. I admit it. I actually learn critical thinking skills, logic and stuff from people who've got degrees in it. And I'm still learning. Yeah, I admit that there's people more intelligent than I. There's always somebody.
Examination simply accurate. The United States of America is the only known country in the world throughout history that was deliberately, structurally, ideologically, from the ground up, founded on anti-intellectualism.
Oh.
Not a country that tried to revoke knowledge, a country that had anti-intellectualism written into its foundational cultural DNA before the ink on its constitution was dry.
Oh.
That is genuinely batshit crazy, but it does answer a lot of questions. Anti-intellectualism, if you want a formal definition, is a hostility towards or distrust of intellectuals, intellectual pursuits, and expertise. The idea that knowledge is suspicious, that educated people are probably up to something, that gut feeling and common sense are more trustworthy than evidence and analysis, that the person who has spent 30 years studying a subject has less credibility.
Sounds like Pol Pot, and I'm sure there's been a couple of other countries. Yeah, anti-intellectualism.
Than the person who read about on their phone on Tuesday. Most countries have pockets of anti-intellectualism. It exists everywhere to some degree. What makes America categorically different is that anti-intellectualism was not a reaction to its founding institutions. It was part of them. It was present at its creation, and it was useful to the people doing the creating. You are uniquely special, just not in the way you thought you were. The dominant story America tells itself is the story of the self-made man, the rugged individualist who didn't need school schooling, didn't need experts, didn't need anyone's help, just grit, faith and common sense. This archetype goes back to the very earliest European...
That sounds like dude there, anti-intellectual, because he hated on the layman's seminaries. I mean, I don't think a great deal of layman's seminary. In fact, even though he's got a degree, apparently, I think he's actually thicker than pig poop. Same as Sky Out. He got a degree, apparently. I don't know what counts for a degree over there and how they measure up against the degrees that you can get in this country. If it's the same thing, I don't know. I haven't looked into it. I haven't really come across a video on it. I might do, actually. I might look or communicate with somebody on YouTube in some way. Yeah, I mean, Sky Out actually thinks, and this is a guy with a degree, apparently, that Calvin was an early church father. And then you got Charlie Michaels. You know, if he got a genuine degree from a university, fine. And apparently, this is what I heard, he even admits that the university he got his degree from is loaded with false teaching. Can't remember exactly how he phrased it or whatever. I'm not against intellectualism, I'm against somebody being like intelligent or learned on a particular subject. Dude seems to be, he feels perhaps threatened by somebody with a degree. They might have advanced knowledge. I've got 1/3 of a degree in pure mathematics. I was going to get a proper degree in pure maths all the way through, and it was just getting too difficult. Not the study, but just getting tutors in, because I was in high security prisons and this, that, and the other. You'd get a guy coming in like once every 3 months, maybe twice a year, and yeah. I mean, if I had the money, I'd probably go and finish my degree off, and I'd do it in pure maths. I'd have to revise some of the stuff I've done. I don't think I'd have a great deal of difficulty with it.
Person who read about on their phone on Tuesday. Most countries have pockets of anti-intellectualism. It exists everywhere to some degree.
Yeah.
What makes America categorically different is that anti-intellectualism was not a reaction to its founding institutions. It was part of them. It was present at its creation, and it was useful to the people doing the creating. You are uniquely special, just not in the way you thought you were. The dominant story America tells itself is the story of the self-made man, the rugged individualist who didn't need schooling, didn't need experts, didn't need anyone's help, just grit, faith and common sense. This archetype goes back to the very earliest European settlers, many of whom were religious communities that left Europe specifically because they found it too tolerant, enlightened and intellectually opened. They were not fleeing oppression so they could build a society of free inquiry. They were fleeing because they wanted to build a society where the truth was already settled by God, by scripture, by community elders, and it was not up for debate. Now, yes, the founding fathers, some of them were genuinely brilliant. Jefferson, Madison, Franklin, Hamilton, educated, widely read, deeply influenced by European Enlightenment thought. But here's what the mythology leaves out. Those men were the elite. Wealthy, travelled, multilingual, and they were mistrusted for it almost immediately by a large portions of the population they were supposedly leading. The first great organised expression of anti-intellectualism as a political force arose with the rise of populist democracy in the early 19th century. The idea that any ordinary man was just as qualified to govern as a trained statesman. That book learning was a form of corruption, that educated people were probably up to something. Andrew Jackson, America's 7th president, built his entire political identity on contempt for educated elites. He was celebrated for it. He is still on the $20 note. Wow, that is fucked up. Jesus Christ. Okay, so the soil was prepared early. What grew in it over the next 2 centuries was a culture where intelligence became something you apologized for. Expertise became something you treated with suspicion, and common sense came to mean whatever you already believed before you heard the evidence. A population that distrusts expertise is a population that won't question the factory owner, the landlord, the preacher, or the politician. It is, in the most literal sense, easier to manage. Every single thing we are about to cover in this video, the school system, the media, the gun debate, the military worship, the exploitative dysfunction, all of it flows directly from this founding fact. Once you understand that anti-intellectualism is not a flaw of the American feature, but a feature of it, the rest stops being confusing really quickly. The school system. How to engineer a population that cannot think critically, a documented, time-stamped history. The American school system does not accidentally fail to teach critical thinking. It was structurally designed that way through a series of deliberate policy decisions spanning 2 centuries to produce something other than critical thinkers. What it was designed to produce changes slightly depending on era, but the output has been remarkably consistent. Compliant, testable, manageable people who know how to follow instructions but are not particularly equipped to question them. That's not a conspiracy theory, that's a paper trail, so let's go through it. The Prussian system, mid-1800s. In the mid-19th century, American education reformers, most prominently Horace Mann, travelled to Prussia and came back enormously impressed by what they found. The Prussian system was efficient, standardized, and produced highly disciplined graduates. American industrialists and politicians adopted it enthusiastically. What they did not advertise was what the Prussian system was actually designed to do. Not to produce curious, independent thinkers, but obedient soldiers and compliant factory workers. Children sat in rows, faced forward, memorized what the teacher said, and did not question. They received, retained, and repeated. The teacher was the authority, and the authority was never to be questioned. This model suited American industrialists perfectly. The country was industrializing rapidly. It needed workers who would show up, follow instructions, operate machinery safely, and did not organize. It did not need workers who asked why. The Prussian system delivered exactly what was required, and it became the foundational architecture of the American public education system. Much of it remains intact today. Let that sink in. The model that still shapes how millions of American children are educated was imported from 19th century Prussia specifically because it was good at producing people who follow orders. That's it. P.S.
Nobody cares where he is. And I'm not going to read your comment out. Tim Matthews, you nauseating pig.
The Nazis loved that system when they inherited it. IQ testing and the eugenics agenda. 1917 to the 1930s. During the First World War, the US Army developed mass intelligence testing to produce recruits, and afterwards, psychologists led by Lewis Terman at Stanford adopted those tests to use in schools. What the history books tend to gloss over is that the IQ testing movement was explicitly and openly linked to eugenics. The point was not to identify who needed more support, it was to sort the population, to identify who was worth educating and who was not. The tests were designed by white upper-class academics saturated with cultural assumptions that made them almost impossible to perform well on if you were poor, immigrant, or black. And the results were used to track children as young as 8 into academic or vocational streams that they almost never left. By the 1930s, America had built a school system that formally sorted children by race and class, called it meritocracy, and ensured that the children who needed the analytical education the most were precisely the ones to least receive it. The eugenics movement was eventually discredited. The world saw where it led Nazi Germany, but the tracking system survived. Ability groupings remain widespread in American schools. The populations in lower tracts remain disproportionately poor and non-white. The mechanisms changed, but the outcome did not. The Red Scare, critical thinking as communism, 1950s. In the 1950s, a new threat to critical thinking arrived from a rather unexpected direction: anti-communism. The McCarthy era produced a cultural climate in which teaching children to question authority, examine evidence from multiple perspectives, or consider ideas that challenged the status quo was treated as potentially subversive, potentially un-American, potentially communist. School curricula was scrutinized for anything that looked like it might produce a child who asked inconvenient questions. Progressive education, which emphasized inquiry, debate, or independent thinking, was attacked as a vehicle of communist indoctrination. Teachers were investigated, textbooks were changed. The message delivered clearly and consistently was that the proper role of education was to transmit American values, not interrogate them. What the fuck was wrong with these people? The long-term effect of this period on American education is difficult to overstate. It created a cultural norm still present today in which teaching children to think critically about their own country, its history, and its institutions is treated as an act of disloyalty rather than an act of education. This is the direct ancestor of the current battles over what can and cannot be taught in American classrooms. No Child Left Behind, 2001. Fast forward to 2001, George W. Bush signs the No Child Left Behind Act at the most significant federal intervention in American education in decades. The stated goal was admirable: close the achievement gap, hold schools accountable, ensure every child reached a basic proficiency in reading and maths. The mechanism was standardized testing. Schools were required to test students annually, and those that failed to meet the benchmarks faced reduced funding, restructuring, or closure, with teacher performance, school performance, and funding all contingent on the same scores. The result was entirely predictable to anyone who thought about the incentive structure for more than 30 seconds. Schools stopped teaching what was not tested. Critical thinking is not easily tested on a standardized exam. Neither is creativity, civic reasoning, ethical analysis, media literacy, philosophical inquiry, or the ability to construct and evaluate an argument. Art, music, and drama, subjects that develop lateral thinking and imaginative capacity, were cut to make room for test preparation. Schools in poor areas, already under-resourced and under pressure, became almost entirely focused on drilling students for the specific questions that they would face on the specific test that determined whether the school survived. No Child Left Behind did not close the achievement gap. What it did do, comprehensively and measurably, was to narrow the curriculum, reward repetition and memorization, punish open-ended inquiry, and produce a generation of students who were very good at answering preset questions and very poorly equipped to ask measurement, which is, if you've been paying attention, exactly what the Prussian system was designed to do 150 years earlier. 15, but the standardized testing culture it embedded remains. The damage to curriculum breadth, to teacher autonomy, to the place of critical thinking in American classrooms was not undone by changing the location. For us to jump in the comments, yes, we have now only 4 years of schooling, not 12. The states are significantly lower. It does not get teachers. It never resulted in schools paying of everything else. It is not the same thing. It is not even close to the same thing. The structural result. The single most important structural fact about the American education today is this: there is no national curriculum. Education is controlled at the local level by elected school boards across roughly 13,000 school districts. What a child learns depends almost entirely on where they were born. A child in Texas may be taught that the Civil War was primarily about states' rights. A child in Massachusetts may be taught it was about slavery. And when they grow up and disagree, they are not being irrational. They were trained to disagree. It was built in. School funding is tied to local property taxes, meaning schools in wealthy areas are extraordinarily well-resourced and schools in poorer areas are not. And the children in most need of a decent external education are the ones the system is least likely to provide it to. The United States spends more per student than almost any other country on earth, but it consistently ranks in the middle of the pack on international assessments of actual student understanding. The money is there, the outcomes really aren't. And when you understand the history, we have just covered the anti-intellectualism, the Prussian compliance model, the eugenics tracking system, the anti-communist suppression of inquiry, the No Child Left Behind testing regime. That gap stops being a mystery. It becomes the entirely predictable result of a system that was never, at any point of its history, primarily designed to produce critical thinking. It was designed to produce people who would follow instructions. And on that matter, it has been extraordinarily successful. Part 4, adulthood. You leave school, the machinery follows you. You graduate, you know the Pledge of Allegiance by heart, but you have almost no critical thinking skills to ask why that is the case. You are now an adult. The indoctrination infrastructure of your school years is behind you. Surely now you can think for yourself. Nope. The ritual continues, it just gets bigger. The Pledge of Allegiance that you did every morning, every single morning, well, what replaces that is something more ambient and more powerful, a total saturation of national symbolism in everyday civilian life. The flag is everywhere, on porches, on bumper stickers, on clothing, on shop windows, outside car dealerships. The national anthem plays before every sporting event, from NFL games to minor league baseball and high school athletics on a Tuesday night. Military flyovers at stadiums, veteran tributes on every occasion. Thank you for your service, that said like bless you after someone sneezes. The conditioning continues and you don't have the skills to question it. That's not a mistake. The function is identical to the pledge. It is a daily prompt, many times a day often, in many different contexts, to feel something about your country before you think anything about it. Emotion precedes analysis. Loyalty is assumed. Questioning is socially costly. The childhood ritual of compulsory patriotism becomes the adult environment of ambient patriotism, and the effect on critical thinking is the same. It makes certain questions feel like personal attacks before they've even been asked. But these rituals are not merely ambient, they are enforced. Participation is technically voluntary, but refusal is punished. And that distinction between technically voluntary and functionally compelled is exactly how authoritarian cultures operate inside a democratic framework. Koperniak and Landmesser, you participate or you pay. Consider this. There is a famous photograph from 1936, a ship launch in Hamburg, hundreds of people giving the Nazi salute, and in the middle of that crowd is one man standing with his arms crossed instead. His name is believed to be August Landmesser. He refused the ritual and he was later identified, convicted, and eventually killed in a penal battalion. In 2016, Colin Kaepernick, NFL player, knelt during the national anthem at a game to protest police brutality against Black Americans. He didn't burn anything. He did not shout. He knelt quietly during a song. The response was career-ending. He was called a traitor. Death threats followed. Every NFL team declined to sign him despite his obvious ability. The President of the United States called him a son of a bitch at a political rally to cheering crowds. Now, America is not Nazi Germany. That's not the argument. The argument is this. Compelled loyalty ritual and the punishment of those who refuse them are a structural feature of authoritarian culture, regardless of which flag they are performed under. Such a small stepping out of line results with such proportionate punishment. Landmesser was destroyed by the state. Koperniak was destroyed by the market, the league, and the political establishment. Different mechanisms, identical message. You participate or you pay. And when a ritual makes you a traitor rather than a dissenter, the ritual is no longer a symbol. The country where symbols cannot be questioned has confused loyalty loyalty with thought and made them enemies. The entertainment complex. America is always the hero. Hollywood is not a neutral storytelling machine. It is the most powerful cultural export in human history, and for decades it has operated under a consistent set of assumptions. America is fundamentally good. American foreign policy, however messy, is ultimately motivated by the right values. American soldiers are noble. American institutions are, in the end, trustworthy. The villain is foreign or domestic and unusual, never systemic, never the country itself. This is not an accident. The Pentagon's Entertainment Liaison Office has co-produced hundreds of films and television series in exchange for access to equipment and locations, with script approval as a condition. Movies that portray the US military critically do not get the aircraft carriers. Movies that portray it heroically do. The result is a cinematic landscape that has spent 70 years telling Americans and the rest of the world a particular story about who Americans are.
Yes, they are all heroic. They're all heroes in their own mind. Yes, when really they're a load of bang. Yes, they are SHIT. Yes, if you ever have to go on a mission with Americans, then get rid of them first. That would be my best advice there.
And what their country stands for. When you have absorbed that story since childhood across thousands of hours of film and television, it becomes the emotional baseline against all the other information it's measured. Facts that fit the story feel true. Facts that are contradicting feel like propaganda. This is not a conscious process. It is what happens when entertainment is used at scale over time to shape a culture's understanding of itself. Social media, the American product, American political choice, an American problem exported globally. Before we talk about what social media has done to a population, let's be clear about what it is. Social media was created by American tech giants. It was allowed to grow without restriction by the American government, who chose repeatedly and deliberately not to regulate it. The largest English-speaking user base is the American population. The algorithms that determine what billions of people around the world see every day were built in California, optimized by American engagement patterns, and reflect the American cultural assumptions about what content should be amplified and what should be suppressed. This is not a neutral global utility. It is an American product shaped by American political choices run on American values, or more accurately, on the absence of them. Information overload as a suppressor of critical thinking. Here's a mechanism that doesn't get nearly enough attention. In an environment of information abundance, hundreds of cable channels, millions of websites, social media feeds that never end, the instinctive assumption is that more information produces better informed citizens. But the opposite is closer to true. When you are bombarded with more information than you can possibly process from more sources than you can possibly evaluate, the cognitively rational response is to outsource your judgment. You cannot verify everything, you cannot assess all the sources, so you fall back on a shortcut. You trust the sources that your tribe trusts. You distrust the sources that your tribe distrusts. Information overload does not produce skepticism, it produces surrender of individual judgment to collective tribal authority. This is why the explosion of available information in the internet age has not produced more informed American public.
No wonder.
It has produced a more confidently misinformed
Tribal authority. No wonder the pod team, Tom, Dude, Olive. What was I going to say then? It's tribalism. That's what it is. It isn't free grace. Because what she was just describing there sounds like free grace. Yeah, tribalism. You go against that group, that tribe, and you're going to get attacked. And that is a warning, not just to anybody who attacks it, if we can call it a warning. It's a warning, a sort of veiled threat to those in the side chat on the Pod Teams channel. You go against us and you're going to get a load of poo. You're going to get treated like a pile of poo. Yeah.
one. The volume of competing claims is itself a suppressor of critical thinking, because critical thinking requires time, cognitive resources, and a framework for evaluation that most Americans were never given. It is the absence of that framework. More information just means more noise, and more noise means more to retreat from to whatever your team says is right, which is why a Fox News viewer is less accurately informed on facts than someone who watches no news at all. Let that sink in. The defunding of civic and adult education. Let us say generously that someone makes it through the American school system with their curiosity intact somehow. They are now an adult and they want to learn. They want to develop the analytical skills that they were not given in school. What infrastructure exists for them? Less than there used to be, unfortunately, and far less than comparable countries. Public library funding has been cut in real terms across most of the country over the past 3 decades. Community college, the primary route to affordable further education for working adults, has been defunded in most states, with costs shifted to students. Adult literacy and continuing education programs have been cut. Civic education programs, which once existed to give adults the tools to participate meaningfully in democratic life, have largely disappeared. The message delivered by this defunding is not subtle. The infrastructure that might allow American adults to compensate for the poor school education, to develop critical thinking after the fact, to become a more informed citizen, has been systematically dismantled at the same time that the information environment has become more complex and more manipulative. Epistemic tribalism, the end state. All of the above produces reliably and predictably a condition that researchers call epistemic tribalism. Yeah. Your tribe determines what is true. Evidence that supports your tribe's position is real, credible, and important. Evidence that challenges that is fake, biased, politically motivated, or attacking you personally. The source of the information matters more than the content. The team that produces it matters more than what is actually accurate. This is not stupidity necessarily, but an entirely rational adaptation of the mind that was never given the tools to evaluate evidence independently, has been trained since childhood to feel loyalty before thinking critically, and is now drowning in more information than it could possibly ever handle in an environment optimized to exploit tribal instincts. Given those conditions, epistemic tribalism is not a failure of intelligence, it's a survival strategy. The big problem, though, is that democracy cannot function on epistemic tribalism. A democracy requires citizens who can, at minimum, evaluate the basic factual claims, recognize when they are being misled, and update their positions to response to evidence. Epistemic tribalism makes all three of those things not just unlikely, but actively threatening to the individual's sense of identity and community belonging. Changing your mind in a tribally divided information environment means betraying your team. And most people, given the choice between truth and belonging, will choose belonging every time, because belonging kept humans alive for hundreds of thousands of years before critical thinking was even a concept. Who benefits and why there's no conspiracy required? At this point, a reasonable person asks, who actually wants this? Who benefits from a population of adults that cannot think critically? And the honest answer is that the beneficiaries are many, which makes it so much more durable. Large tech companies profit from engagement over accuracy. Outrage keeps people on the platform, and it doesn't matter to the algorithm whether the outrage is justified or not. Political parties on both sides benefit from loyal, unquestioning bases rather than genuinely independent voters who might defect on any given issue. Corporations benefit from consumers who do not scrutinize their products, their labor practices, or their environmental record. Politicians do better when fewer people vote, and the ones who do are angry and loyal. Wealthy donors benefit from tax and regulatory environment that a critical thinking majority would never have voted for. Oh yeah, and one more. Who else benefits? The church. Religious organizations are among the most direct and least discussed beneficiaries of a population that was never taught to examine claims critically. Prosperity gospel is the clearest example. God rewards faith with wealth. Your poverty is a spiritual failing. Your pastor's private jet is evidence of divine favor. This collapses under 30 seconds of scrutiny and contradicts the foundational text it claims to represent and is transparently self-serving for the person asking for the money. It survives only because critical thinking was never taught to the population at large. And then there is the individual level. In a population with strong critical thinking, a charismatic person who wants wealth and power has to compete in arenas where their claims get tested. In a population without it, pastoral ministry is one of the most efficient routes available. No qualifications required, tax-free income, a congregation preconditioned to follow authority and socially punish anyone who questions the leadership. To question the pastor is to question God. It is a near-perfect environment for narcissistic exploitation. The flock was prepared by the school system. The shepherd arrived and took advantage of it. This isn't an attack on people with faith. You do not need a naive population to have a healthy religious community, but you do need one to run a televangelical empire. The full picture. Technology companies, political parties, corporations, incumbent politicians, wealthy donors, predatory financial institutions, religious empires. None of them conspire together. All of them benefit from the same outcome, though. The school system was not designed by a conspiracy. It was shaped by industrialists, eugenicists, Cold War politicians, and standardized testing lobbyists, each pursuing their own agenda. The adult information environment was not designed by conspiracy. It was shaped by cable news executives, social media engineers, and political operatives, each pursuing their own agenda. The conspiracy theory version of this story is actually less frightening than the truth. The truth is that you do not need a conspiracy when you have aligned incentives. The machine runs itself. Part 5. What this has done to the American people and why they should be livid. This was done to you, and you deserve to be furious about it. The American people are not the villains in this story, they are the victims. And the people who did this to them did it deliberately for profit over generations. The theft of intellectual competence. Tens of millions of Americans who are perfectly capable of sophisticated thought were taught that thinking is not for them. That gut feeling is just as valid as expertise. That the person with the library card is the suspicious one. That is not freedom. That is a con that takes your own intelligence and turns it against you. Working class Americans were told that incuriosity was their identity. The people who told them that got very, very rich. The health cost. The US has the worst health outcomes of any wealthy nation while paying more for healthcare than anywhere else on earth. A population taught to distrust medical expertise delays treatment, refuses vaccines, follows misinformation, and dies earlier than it should because it was deliberately taught to distrust the people who could have helped it. Every comparable country has universal health care, and every comparable country has better outcomes. That is not a coincidence. The financial cost. Payday lenders, for-profit colleges, predatory mortgages, multi-level marketing. These industries thrive on America specifically because critical thinking was withheld from their people they target. Young Americans were handed decades of debt for degrees whose value has already collapsed by institutions that knew this and said nothing. The political cost. Americans vote against their own interests with a consistency that baffles the rest of the world because the emotional framing was always more powerful than the policy analysis that they were never taught to do. The cruelest part is that the people most shaped by that conditioning are usually the ones defending it the hardest because admitting that was done to them means admitting that the identity they built and the community they found was constructed by people who never had their interests at heart. The social cost. When truth is determined by what team you're on, the fracturing moves into families, friendships, and communities until the social fabric tears completely. Americans report higher rates of loneliness than citizens in comparable countries. Americans did not choose to hate each other. They were put in conditions designed by people who found their divisions profitable. Why the rage is justified and where it should be directed. The rage is legitimate. It is the correct response to what is being done. But It is aimed with their extraordinary precision by people who benefit from its misdirection at immigrants, academics, journalists, and other tribes, rather than the architects of conditioning producing it. If you are an American watching this and you are angry, you should be. You were robbed. And the people who robbed you have been very careful to make sure you send that anger somewhere else. Part 6, consequences and authoritarianism. Where it lands. Everything in this video has a logical endpoint, and we're at it. Democracy hollows out before it falls. The institutions remain, the elections continue, the flag still flies, but the substance drains away when the population no longer has the tools to protect it from someone who wanted to exploit it. Authoritarianism arrives as a series of individually survivable moments. A norm broken here, an institution undermined here. Each step is absorbed, and each step makes the next one easier. And a population that was never taught to recognize the pattern will dismiss warnings as partisan hysteria until it's too late. Since taking office, Trump has attacked the independence of the judiciary, defunded and dismantled federal agencies, purged the civil service of anyone not personally loyal to him, including the heads of the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the senior military leadership. You know, the thing that you're so proud of and maybe the only way to get you out of this mess, the Attorney General, the senior Justice Department officials, Inspector Generals across multiple departments, and the list goes on. Declared the press the enemy of the people and used the power of executive to punish political opponents and reward allies. He has withdrawn from international institutions, torn up alliances, and openly expressed admiration for authoritarian leaders while treating democratic ones as contempt. That is not normal disagreement. This is the systematic removal of the checks and balances that prevent one person from having unchecked power. And the population that was supposed to resist this, the informed citizenry that democracy requires, was never built. Part 7. So let's be specific about why the internet...
Yeah. All of those descriptions sound like Free Grace, the pod team, dude, Tom, Olive. Yeah, you'd better not disagree. You'll lose your salvation. Tony Cato, the dunce, nearly lost his the other day. He spent 3 valiant days defending himself. Yeah.
The national community is done. Your dysfunction doesn't stay at home, it travels, and we are done being polite about it. So, now we know how the US got itself into this mess that it is currently in, and many Americans, finding themselves in this most difficult of moments, are looking to the international community for the support and finding precious little of it, assuming, because critical thinking was never your strong suit, that we are simply unsympathetic, that we don't care, that we've abandoned you. And if you had been taught to think critically, you might have worked out why the support has dried up. We have spent this entire video being measured and fair. We have explained the structural causes, acknowledged the systemic failures, and been careful to separate the American people from the American system. We're going to set all that aside now, because the international community has a few things that it wants to tell your narcissistic personality of a country. And it's about time that you heard the truth in a manner that a majority of you can process. Emotional, at volume, with no nuance. Buckle up, buttercup, we've got a few things that we need to get off our chest. You manufacture your own crises, perform victimhood about them, and call it everyone else's problem. The manosphere, the red pill crew, the climate denial industry, cancel culture, the incel movement, hustle culture and the self-made myth, the anti-vaccine pipeline, the do-your-own-research movement, the privilege framework weaponizing so your identity determines the validity of everything you say, the self-diagnosis culture, QAnon, academic postmodernism, the idea that objective truth is power construct, the everything is racist framework, the purity test culture where ideological perfection matters more than the actual outcome, the prosperity gospel, performative activism, changing your profile picture instead of changing anything at all, the stolen election industry, the crisis actor conspiracy, the sovereign citizen movement, the prepper and doomsday movement, the outrage economy, flat earth, the I'm being persecuted because I identify as every letter under the fucking alphabet, the wellness and radicalization pipeline. Every single one created in America by Americans serving the same damn purpose, to play the victim so the individual never has to look in the mirror, never has to take accountability or to have any responsibility. And we know you love playing the victim because from the outside it looks like a sexual compulsion. You genuinely cannot help yourself. It's like playing the victim makes you fucking horny, which makes sense coming from a nation that manages to wriggle its way out of every fucking swarm of accountability from everything that it has ever done, including every fucking war crime, which is a very long list. That is the whole video in and of itself. Your children have been getting shot for decades at schools. Over 400 school shootings since Columbine, and you have done nothing about it. And after all of that, a bunch of your people and your politicians actually had the balls to tell Australians that we were pathetic for giving up our guns to save our people, when you morons can't even pick up a damn book about how another country solved its problem, because that might make you less of a man. Now your billionaires are sniffing around our politics, trying to undo the gun laws that saved our children. Maybe you should pull all those school shooters into your military, because they seem to love the victim mentality and the bloodlust, so they fit fucking right in. Speaking of which, our service people have dying in your wars. Here is something the international community has understood for a very long time that America doesn't seem to recognize. You are the typical cliche of a schoolyard bully. When everything is chaotic and painful at home, rather than deal with it, you go out and throw your weight around the playground. You start fights that aren't yours to start. You blow shit up. You make yourself impossible to ignore. And then when the playground hits back, and September 11 was the playground hitting back, Americans are genuinely shocked, genuinely could not understand why anyone would want to do that, because bullies never see themselves as bullies, do they? Your country starts all these bloody wars, often just for shits and giggles or for profit or for geopolitical vanity, rarely out of any genuine necessity, even though that's what they tell you, and then pressures our government into sending our troops, many of whom come home in boxes. Then your government turns around and says that our dead soldiers meant nothing, but yours were war heroes. And yes, why the public didn't start the wars, you are constantly kissing the asses of those who signed up to be part of it, even though they knew that your government always does this, and it's never about defense, so you can't blame the just bullying orders. Meanwhile, the military worship continues. No one asks questions. There's no pressure on the government to stop it, meaning that more of your people die, more of our people die, more innocent people die. That is on you as individuals. Stop kissing asses and start asking questions. Or do you honestly love the murder? Because from the outside, that's exactly what it looks like. You exported your dysfunctional religion, the prosperity gospel. God rewards faith with wealth, and your poverty is your spiritual failing, and your pastor's jet is divine favor, is an American theological export, now bleeding communities dry around Africa, South America, and the parts of Southeast Asia. People who cannot afford medicine are giving away money because the American train operator told them that God was keeping score. This is not Christianity. This is monetized exploitation model developed in America, franchised globally, running on the same absence of critical thinking that made it work back home. Pastors flying private jets over communities that cannot afford to eat. Made in America, exported it worldwide. You export your dysfunction to our children. Our children are collateral damage of your unregulated capitalism and your bought legislator. The individual Americans who share this content day after day are not victims of the algorithm. They are choosing to click the post. Our kids did not go looking for this. It was pushed on them. The 13-year-old girl in Melbourne did not search content telling her that she was worthless. It found her. A 15-year-old boy in Lee did not seek out the pipeline to loneliness, to misogyny. It was recommended to him step by step, because that is what the engagement metric rewarded. A 12-year-old in Lagos did not choose anti-vaccine conspiracy theories. They arrived in his language, targeted to his age group, because the algorithm optimized in California decided that his attention was worth more than his health. And then there's the therapeutic language, concepts about trauma and mental health, and exported them via social media, stripped of every bit of clinical context. And now they are being used by teenagers every year as a weapon against accountability. A teenager in Brisbane is triggered about being asked to clean their room. A teenager in Dublin is traumatized by a deadline. A teenager in Johannesburg has declared that their best friend is talking to help people conversation reach, easier to manipulate, and completely pushed by American content creators. Andrew Tate, Alex Jones, Josh Rogan, and behind them, thousands of smaller American creators yelling into their phones like unhinged robots desperate to seek validation from strangers who in turn pile into their comments and start screaming, also arguing about that they are absolutely right. Shocking update to all of you. No one has ever changed their mind from an argument in this. Keep the algorithm fed and keep the content coming. By the way, that 48 hours that US got kicked off TikTok was the best 48 hours our feeds have seen in years. We still talk fondly about it. And now those same tech giants want to do it all again with AI. The same companies that built the platform suppressed the research and thought every regulation has handed our children's mental health over to the engagement algorithm. They are now racing to build artificial intelligence with zero meaningful oversight. And your government, rather than regulating them, has just forced those AI companies to produce AI military weapons and build an entire surveillance network to spy on the American people. Good job. Fine. The international community really unhinged or deeply offensive in public in another country, in a place where it's not theirs, it gets filmed, it goes on social media. The international community takes one look and says, definitely an American, and we are right most of the time. The loud one demanding a manager at a restaurant in Paris, the one desecrating a site in Bali, the one screaming about their rights as a public servant in a country where those rights were never promised, caught on camera, exported globally, filed under why we had, not to mention the American screaming at a sales assistant in Japan for not speaking English, the American tourist telling someone in Stonehenge how everything is better in the US. Not every American, but almost always an American. You are inescapable and you have no idea. We did not choose to become experts on American politics and American shootings, American culture wars and American grief. The algorithm and the news cycle chose that for us. We know about your city names, your political figures, your school districts. We know it is in every feed, every platform every single day without a break. Your police shootings, your elections, your poverty, your outrage, relentless and inescapable. And we have a chunk of the American population has no rights, and we are nowhere in yours, and still the people point the that is having been just not in British English because the temperature that everyone mentions is Fahrenheit. You say what state you're in when someone asks what country you're from. You're causing that that's what happens on the southern hemisphere for half the fucking world. Your mind is the reference point for all human experience on Earth. You are exhausted. You are genuinely no idea. Now we are paying for your mess with our economies. The village idiot is their equipment. Our workers cannot afford to drive to work. Our businesses are eating the cost for decisions made by Washington, by people elected by a population that was deliberately systemically stripped money for an education system that was broken on purpose hundreds of years ago. That is not ours. The system produced the voter, yes, but the voter still voted, or who couldn't even be fucking bothered to turn up. And either way, that bill came to us. Do you understand now? That is no sympathy for you in your current situation. Your country has shown again and again that it has no desire to fix its own problems and does not give a shit about anyone else but itself. One last thing, and this one's personal. To our American viewers, This video was not made to kick you while you're down. If you are here, you probably already have the critical thinking skills that we've been talking about. People without them don't tend to go looking for this content. You're likely just as furious about all this as we are, and I see you. But the international community is exhausted, and what's happening now is affecting our economies, our alliances, our daily lives. This stopped being your problem a long while ago. The rest of the world doesn't hate the US. It is looking the way a family looks at a loved one who has been destroying themselves with drugs for years. You warned them, they told you to mind your own business. You tried to help, they took that help and kept destroying themselves. At some point, you stop waiting for things to change. You grieve what you thought they were going to be, you protect your own household, and you hope distantly that one day they will find their way back. But you have stopped betting on it. Please.
Most Americans, I think, are expecting somebody else to do something about it.
Please try to understand that. Go talk death.
Yeah. She mentioned eugenics. I watched a video on it. Started, you know where? USA. Yeah, they're doing eugenics in their own country. They've murdered. Last time I looked, and that was about 2 years ago, 53 million babies in the womb. Yeah. Who can say with any sincerity, God bless America? I can't. I never will. Can't even say God bless England. Let's have a look. Eugenics. There's Isaac. Look. Poor thing. Eugenics. Oh, the Eugenics Crusade. Full documentary. American Experience. PBS. Oh dear. More ads. Oh, truth. I'm just going to look at me notification. Oh no, I'll have a look at them on my mobile phone.
On August 18th, 1934, 20-year-old Ann Cooper Hewitt, heiress to one of the largest fortunes in the United States, was admitted to a San Francisco hospital for an emergency appendectomy. She later learned the
a fallopian. She'd been sterilized. In fact, in America, didn't they used to go around with lobotomy vans? If you wanted your son to have a lobotomy or daughter, you'd just phone them up and lobotomy to order. Sounds like Americans all over the place. I think more. I wouldn't be surprised actually. Sam, get a recording of this, will you? If most Americans have been lobotomized, one would wonder. I'm wondering, and I'm one. So yes. No, nobody's commenting so far. Yeah. And yeah, Americans don't want to watch these kinds of videos about themselves, their own country. Yeah.
The surgeons not only had removed her appendix, but also a length of her fallopian tubes, rendering her incapable of ever becoming pregnant. The story of the sterilized heiress hit the papers just after the new year in 1936, when Anne filed a $500,000 damage claim against the surgeons and her own mother for sterilizing her without her knowledge or consent. Anne's mother denied any wrongdoing. She'd done what she'd done for society's sake, she insisted, because her daughter was feeble-minded.
It sounds like free grace, really, when you think about it. Well, what do they do? And I think it is a Jesuit, because this is a Jesuit maxim. It's a sort of little rule book for the Jesuits, which I think, if I'm going to be awful, the Free Gracers use. Right, let me just remind myself. Oh yeah. Admit nothing. Make counter accusations. Deny everything. Yeah, that's it. What's the order now? Deny everything, admit nothing, and make counter accusations. Sounds like Free Gracers over there, and Eastmax, and every other disgusting bastard that I've been in communication with on YouTube that actually lives in America.
It was the sort of bizarre high society scandal that would have captured the national imagination under any circumstances. But that one word, feeble-minded, struck a familiar chord for Americans and linked Anne's plight to a decades-old campaign to control human reproduction, known as eugenics.
Yeah.
What is the bearing of the laws of heredity upon human affairs? Eugenics provides the answer.
Eugenics was proposed as the scientific solution for so.
Well, I don't think it was started by America, though, because as I pointed out in a video previously, a live stream, I think the Spartans used to do that. They wouldn't have called it that. If a Spartan woman was to give birth to a deformed baby, if it didn't pass whatever test it was they were doing, they would just throw the baby over a cliff. They would just throw it over a cliff. Thank you, Non-Denon, for pointing out something I already knew. America made it popular in America. Lobotomy vans, eugenics. Oh, hold on. Who did Prescott Bush fund? Hitler. I think the American banking system funded the Bolshevik Revolution. If you know anything, yeah, all right. What else did they fund? Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood. 53 million abortions in USA so far, and that was when I checked about 2 years ago. I haven't looked at it since. I might do today, just to update my numbers. Yeah. And you actually want to know why I despise the USA? Are you kidding? And Eugenie, I've got no loyalty to the USA. I'm not a traitor to your country at all. I despise it. If somebody posted me an American flag or the original Constitution or Bill of Rights as it was written, I would literally either shred it up or I'd cut it into little pieces so I could make it into toilet paper. Hopefully the ink wouldn't be poisonous. It probably was. Yeah, you send me an American flag and I'll wipe my arse on it, as long as it's not too rough. I mean, if it's really rough and scratchy, yeah. Oh well, there you go. I'm an ex-British soldier and you expected some kind of loyalty and respect for the USA. Are you kidding? Are you kidding?
Social problems. It was a combination of hope and aspiration on one side, and on the other side, it was about fear, in some cases about hate.
They are identified early, categorized, feeble-minded, imbecile, idiot.
It would have been better by far if they had never been born.
People tend to think that eugenics was a doctrine that originated with the Nazis.
No, it didn't.
That it was grounded in wild claims that were far outside the scientific mainstream. Both of those impressions are fundamentally not true.
It was almost a mania that sort of swept through the country, and there was that kind of naive, optimistic vision of eugenics, like, hey, let's all get together and make better people.
The eugenics movement was about having healthy children, about having a stronger society. There's nothing wrong with that. You have to look at the underbelly of what was implemented in the name of eugenics to see what was so problematic about it.
At Liberty Mutual, we believe progress happens when people feel secure. That's why we exist to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow.
Liberty, liberty, liberty.
Liberty, liberty, liberty.
Liberty Mutual Insurance is a proud sponsor of American Experience.
Oh, yeah. Liberty, liberty, liberty. Yeah.
In the fall of 1902, an American biologist named Charles Benedict Davenport arrived in London on a sort of pilgrimage. He was 36, Harvard educated, and like many biologists of his generation, absorbed with the study of evolution. He'd been traveling in Europe with his wife, collecting seashells for research on species variation. But this was to be the highlight of the trip: a meeting with the world-renowned gentleman scientist, a pioneering statistician. Galton had lived his 80 years by a single motto: whenever you give measurements and patterns, had led him to create the world's first weather maps, establish fingerprinting as a means of identification, and set data-backed parameters for the perfect cup of tea. Charles Davenport had come to discuss another matter: Galton's work on heredity.
Francis Galton was a great quantifier. He liked to quantify height, hair color, even things like intelligence.
Galton had a theory that talent, as he called it, what we would call intelligence, seemed to run in families. And so it quickly occurred to him, if we can get people with high talent to mate with each other, prevent people with low talent from mating with each other, we will, within a few generations, create this race of supermen.
Francis Galton was borrowing ideas and kind of riffing off of the work of his half-cousin, Charles Darwin.
Darwin believed that evolution was this natural process that was inevitably leading towards what they called the survival of the fittest. Galton really turns that idea on its head and says, you know, natural selection isn't working very well. We need to do a form of selection.
You need to look at America.
We need to intervene.
To name the effort, Galton had coined the term eugenics, a hybrid derived from two Greek words, meaning well and born. Charles Davenport believed, as Galton did, that selective breeding could transform the human race. What was needed was a scientific understanding of how heredity actually worked. And over dinner at Galton's home, Davenport declared his intention to get to the bottom of it.
Davenport said, I'm going to create a new kind of institution, a station for experimental evolution. Not Darwinian natural selection that you just go out and observe, but can we figure out how inheritance works? Can we do experiments and find the patterns of heredity.
When Davenport sailed for home in December 1902, he carried with him not only a letter of recommendation signed by Galton, but also, he later wrote, a renewed courage for the study of evolution.
Davenport and Galton really did imagine that the idea of improving human heredity was of almost religious significance, of profound moral importance. They also believed they were qualified to breed a better race because they believed that they were the best and the brightest.
Oh. I like English, Bob.
Scarcely more than a year later, with funding from the Carnegie Institution, Davenport opened his research station on the north shore of Long Island at Cold Spring Harbor. Situated on 10 acres along Oyster Bay, the place had been purpose-built for the breeding and analyzing of plants and animals, complete with sprawling garden plots, an aviary, and a half-dozen tidy enclosures housing chickens, goats, and sheep. By mating organisms with unusual characteristics, a tailless Manx cat or a rooster with a black comb, and then studying their offspring generation after generation, Davenport hoped to unlock the mystery of evolution.
Davenport wasn't yet thinking much about humans. He was just absorbing all these different theories of heredity and trying to figure out which ones applied when and under what conditions.
After scores of experiments, one theory seemed to stand out from the rest. The recently discovered work of an Austrian monk named Gregor Mendel, who'd spent a decade in the mid-19th century experimenting with peas.
Mendel learned that there was a pattern to how pea plants passed down certain traits. And you could come up with certain ratios to predict how likely it was that a pea plant would look one way or another.
Davenport took that and ran with it. He goes about breeding all kinds of animals looking for the Mendelian ratio. And in trait after trait, he seems to find the Mendelian ratio.
Suddenly, they're beginning to see a mathematical, scientific explanation for things that had been merely conjectural before.
It's becoming obvious that, in fact, there are these things called genes. These units are being transmitted from parents to their offspring, and they're giving rise to physical traits.
By 1906, the work at Cold Spring Harbor had caught the attention of the press and established Charles Davenport as a rising star in the new science of genetics. Thanks to Mendel's laws of heredity, Davenport told one reporter, agricultural breeders could now precisely select for desirable traits, to develop a strain of protein-rich wheat or chicken that laid more eggs. The same methods would one day lead, he predicted, to a rapid and thoroughgoing improvement of the human race.
Davenport was tantalized by the possibility that you could take charge of human evolution. And then along comes Mendelian genetics, which seems to offer a very powerful tool. So extrapolating from the work that the breeders were doing in animals to the breeding of better human beings was a natural step.
In 1909, Davenport informed his funder, the Carnegie Institution, that he'd shifted his focus from the breeding of cats and roosters to an investigation of human traits. Having already found the Mendelian ratio in early studies of eye color and hair color, and convinced he was on the right track, he now began to collect data on a wide range of other human characteristics. He sent out a family history questionnaire to hundreds of individuals and solicited prisons, hospitals, and educational institutions for their records.
You can't really do breeding experiments with human beings. Aside from the ethics, you just can't live long enough to see generations and generations. So it was Davenport's genius to realize if he could collect family pedigrees, he could trace family inheritances and try to prove that evolution works for human beings the way it works for animals.
Davenport's plan was to analyze the pedigree charts for Mendelian patterns and to identify the desirable traits human beings might encourage through careful breeding, and the undesirable ones they could breed out.
Wouldn't it be a better world if we could wipe out poverty? Wouldn't it be a better world if we didn't have criminals? Wouldn't it be a better world if everyone behaved themselves? And if the reason we have poverty and crime is something that's determined by our genes, if we can change that and make it so that the people who have those bad traits don't pass them down, wouldn't that be a better world?
Among Americans of Charles Davenport's class and generation, there was perhaps no word that had more currency at the turn of the century than improvement. They had come of age in the midst of a revolution, a seismic shift that had made the United States the most prosperous and powerful nation on earth, and in the eyes of many, had simultaneously plunged it into chaos.
It's the beginning of the 20th century. We have rampant urbanization, rampant industrialization, rampant immigration. The old order is passing, and wherever you look, society seems to be deteriorating.
More and more farms were giving way to factories, and the cities were overrun with newcomers, many from the countryside, many hundreds of thousands more from abroad.
There was impure water, and the schools were awful, and the disease was rampant, and immigrants were pouring in.
People were apprehensive about rapid change, about the kinds of people you saw on the streets. Slums, crime, alcoholism, prostitution. Native white Protestants felt that they were losing control of American society.
Determined not only to meet the new challenges, but to master them, a veritable army of educated middle and upper middle class Americans had launched a crusade to remake society, to eliminate corruption, stamp out disease and vice, assimilate the immigrant and uplift the poor, all in the name of progress.
The world had never seen invention as powerful and remarkable and as influential as the last 3 decades of the 19th century. This fueled an already existing American optimism about what can be improved. And it directed it into a particular track, which was scientific improvement.
There was a great belief in science. There was a great belief in government, in bureaucracy, as a tool for solving social problems. And also a belief in collectivism, that the population needs to work together to improve society.
The progressive movement said, we can use state power and expert advice and knowledge to solve things like poverty, to solve things like alcoholism. So that was an incredibly hopeful and optimistic idea. Eugenics was part of that.
When the letter from Charles Davenport arrived in 1909 at New Jersey's Vineland Training School for the Feeble-Minded, the staff hadn't known quite what to make of it. A mere 2-line note requesting hereditary information. One of hundreds Davenport had sent.
Davenport investigated any and all traits. Eye color, weight, mood, habit, temperament, diseases, anything. And then he finds this psychologist in New Jersey, and he begins to zero in on low intelligence, something known as feeble-mindedness.
Psychologist Henry Goddard, Vineland's director of research, had no family histories to share. But what he lacked in data, he more than made up for with enthusiasm. Not only was Goddard interested in the new science of heredity, he asked Davenport to guide him in making his own study of feeble-mindedness.
Like lots of people who are working in institutions, doctors or social workers, Henry Goddard was interested in identifying the kinds of conditions that were passed down in heredity and preventing them.
Henry Goddard was 42 and a one-time teacher in Quaker schools. It was in part an interest in education that had brought him to Vineland in 1906. He'd spent the 3 years since trying to parse the many varieties of feeble-mindedness, an all too common mental deficiency associated with antisocial behavior. Some of Vineland's 300 inmates were violent or deranged, others unruly, still others merely slow. Hoping to improve their individual care and training, Goddard had pioneered the use of an intelligence test, which purported to measure a person's mental abilities in relation to that of so-called normal people of the same age. The scores enabled him to sort his charges into categories. To the existing classifications of idiot and imbecile, which long had been used to describe debilitating mental impairment, Goddard had added a third, a higher functioning group he called morons.
Ah, higher function.
That was actually a diagnostic term and not just an insult. Henry Goddard argued the high-grade moron is high-functioning enough to act normal.
That sounds counterintuitive, that, doesn't it? High-grade moron. I suppose there's lower-grade morons then, and morons that are slightly more intelligent. Oh, I'm not ridiculing morons, you know. So, the Forgotten Genocide, how 112 Native Americans were erased from history. It's only a short video. I might play it. Oh, this is longer. This might... Indian removal. They were just in the way. I'm going to put a link to this search term there. Just copy it. You know, do you really wonder why I call people, well, morons? Maybe I shouldn't use that word. Usually Americans get that description from me. But if you want to have a look at American genocide, yeah, not the best subject in the world, of course. Let's have a look. American Holocaust. Indian removal, that's 2 hours long. I know, I'll type American genocide worldwide. See what it comes up with. An American genocide, yeah. Trump versus native tribes. I didn't know he was against. I had no idea. How long ago was that? 11 months ago. Forgotten genocides. Wonder what's going on with Iran and USA now. Are Iran still bombing you know who? Let's have a listen to this. I'll put a link to this in a minute.
Good morning. My name is Brian Cannon. I direct the Charles Rick Center for Western Studies here at BYU. And I'm pleased to welcome you to today's lecture. The Red Center sponsors research, publication, teaching, and public programs related to the American West and a variety of academic disciplines. It's established through a generous grant from Charlie and Emily Red, who are Utah ranchers and philanthropists.
Philanthropists in America.
Today's lecture is named in honor of William Howard and Hazel Butler Peters, who were civic leaders in Glendale, California. Their children, Susan and Dennis, both attended BYU, and the Peters family generously provided a bequest to the Red Center to promote Western history and Western studies here on the campus. Members of the Peters family are here today, and we extend a special welcome today. We'll begin with an opening prayer. Amy Carlin, the office specialist in the Red Center, will welcome that. And then my colleague in the Red Center, Brenda Renson, will introduce today's lecture.
Father in heaven, we are grateful for the opportunity that we have to be gathered here together to be edified. We're grateful for this university and the opportunities that it gives us. We are grateful that Professor Madley was able to join us to present today's lecture, and we ask thy blessing on him, that he may present all he desires to, and we ask that our minds may be open to receive knowledge. We love thee and say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I'm grateful to be able to introduce our speaker today. Professor Benjamin Madley is a
Get on with it.
of Native America, the United States, and colonialism in world history. He was born in Northern California and spent much of his childhood in Karo country near the Oregon border, which grew his interest in the relationship between colonizers and indigenous peoples. He earned a bachelor's from Yale University, his master's degrees from Oxford, and his doctorate from Yale University as well. After serving as an Andrew Mellon postdoctoral fellow at Dartmouth College, he began teaching history and American Indian Studies at University of California, Los Angeles, where he is currently an associate professor. He writes about American Indians as well as colonialism in Africa, Australia, and Europe, often applying a transnational and comparative approach, which, if you know my background, is right up my alley. He's an author of a dozen published essays, 4 have appeared in edited volumes, and another 8 in journals, ranging from the American Historical Review to the Journal of Genocide Research and Pacific Historical Review. In 2016, Yale University Press published his first book, An American Genocide, the United States and the California Indian Catastrophe, 1846 to 1873. We have a few of those copies available for sale, and he's more than happy to sign them for you if you'd like after the lecture. This book received a number of awards, and I suspect is about to receive a bunch more. It received the Los Angeles Times Book Prize for History, the Raphael Lemkin Book Award from the Institute for the Study of Genocide, the California Book Awards Gold Medal for Californiana, and the Heyday Books History Award. It's also been named a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice, an Indian Country Today Hot List Book, and a Choice Magazine Outstanding Academic Title. True West Magazine recently named him the Best New Western Author of 2016. On a more personal note, about a decade ago, when I was working on my master's thesis, the point of my thesis was that we needed, in Native North America, new studies about genocide in Native North America, and that we were severely lacking good academic works. And it's been with great gratification that books like this by Professor Madley and a number of others have kind of, I don't think he answered the call, he likely was not aware of my master's thesis, but they've in a way answered this call of this amazing research that is much needed, not just for Native North America, but for global and comparative genocide studies. So join me in welcoming Dr. Madley.
Thank you, Brenda.
We also like to present him with this plaque for the Hazel Butler Peters lecture.
Get on with it.
Which you can hang proudly in your office somewhere.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll take his back.
All right. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here, and I appreciate your interest in my work. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're in Indian country. We're on Shoshone and Ute land, I believe, and wherever you go in the great state of Utah, you'll be in Indian country. In fact, wherever you go in the United States or in the entire hemisphere, from the Arctic Ocean to the very tip of Patagonia, you will be on someone's ancient ancestral lands, lands that have been inhabited by indigenous peoples for many thousands of years. So that's one thing I hope, if anything, you'll take away from this is a little sense about the fact that you're living in a place that's been inhabited by people for a very, very long time and that still remains Indian country. The second thing that I'd like to preface this talk with is to acknowledge that for some people in the room, the trauma that we're about to unpack this afternoon together is very real and is ongoing. It inhabits people's waking lives and it inhabits their dream world, their interpersonal relationships. So if at any point someone needs to get up and leave, to take a moment outside to say a prayer, that will be fine with me. And if somebody needs to get up from the audience while they're hearing this talk, please be considerate and polite and give them space to leave the room. The ceremony continued until just before dawn. Illuminated by the central fire, celebrants moved together in ancient rhythms, the women's clamshell necklaces, as you see here in this photo, clicking softly against their beaded seashell dresses. Male dancers dressed as birds, deer, and hunters supported the women in their heavy regalia. Meanwhile, the singers stopped periodically to raise their voices toward the heavens in the ancient formulas of Nidash, the feather dance, giving thanks not only for the original creation of this beautiful world in which we live, but also for its renewal in each and every moment. Finally, the singers stopped and the dancers walked away from the fires. They made their way into snug redwood plank houses through round doors. The Taloa people who hosted this celebration then bedded down next to kith and kin, unaware that less than 8 miles away, white men in Crescent City in northwestern California were preparing to launch the next sortie in California's ever-expanding war of extermination against indigenous peoples. In the pre-dawn hours of the very last day of 1854, as many as 116 volunteer state militiamen, accompanied by an unknown number of auxiliaries, quietly surrounded the village. They took up positions, concealing themselves behind dunes, within the brush, or behind boulders and rocks. As men, women, and children emerged from those redwood houses to begin the day, the militiamen and their allies opened fire. They shot them down, says one eyewitness participant, quote, just as fast as we could reload our rifles. When the screaming and the shooting ended, hundreds of people were dead. Not more than 5 seemed to have survived. In contrast, the attackers suffered a single casualty, and the state of California later paid the militiamen for their work. Between the years 1846 and 1870, the California Indian population plummeted from perhaps 150,000 people to somewhere around 30,000. Now, diseases, starvation, and dislocation all played important roles in this demographic catastrophe. But forced labor, abduction, mass death on federal Indian reservations, homicides, battles, and over 300 separate massacres also took the lives of many thousands and hindered biological reproduction. This was, in fact, a case of genocide. The 1948 United Nations Genocide Convention defines genocide as acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. And it specifies these particular crimes. The convention, while imperfect, provides scholars with an internationally recognized rubric for evaluating possible instances of genocide, including those that took place before 1948 and thus cannot be tried as genocide cases. But they're also important because they get us to think about history in different ways. Following the formulation of this new international legal treaty, scholars began to re-examine and reinterpret the colonization of California under US rule. And by the year 2000, more than 20 scholars had deemed what happened in California between 1846 and 1873 to indeed have been a case of genocide. So why devote 10 years of my life to writing this not insubstantial book? You can use it to get bigger biceps or to hold open a door if you need to. The reason that I think so much detail is necessary is because the question of genocide matters. It matters because the stakes associated with the question of genocide are extraordinarily high. For scholars, there are a variety of questions that we have to address when we think about genocide in California. If the state of California was founded on genocide, scholars will need to re-examine some of the basic assumptions that we have about California Indian history. And one of the basic assumptions is the idea that's quite widespread, that it was disease that was the primary killer of Indian peoples that caused that massive population crash. Scholars also, if we accept that this is a case of genocide, need to re-examine the assumptions that United States history is somehow exceptionalist, that United States history is not like the colonial histories filled with genocide of other countries. I'm thinking of places like Australia, for example. A careful study of genocide in California will also help scholars in examining the larger hemispheric indigenous population catastrophe that took place in both North and South America. Where scholars document genocide, it then becomes necessary to carefully evaluate what roles governments, central and regional and local, played, as well as whether or not killing was part of a national, regional, or even hemispheric pattern. Larger questions then follow. What tends to catalyze genocide? Who ordered the killing? Who carried out the killing?
American pigs from Europe. I mean, eventually they started to. They're proud of their history, American history. So they must be proud of the genocide then, I don't know. This is a bit boring, a bit dry so far. I'll move it forward a bit. It's a bit low in volume as well, though.
People to vote. And when California's legislature met for the first time in early 1850, one of their very first acts was to bar California Indian people from voting, to bar California Indian people of 1/2 or more Indian blood from serving for or against whites in court cases. And they later barred California Indians from serving as jurors and serving as attorneys. So in combination, these laws largely shut Indian people out of participation in and protection by the state's legal system. And abduction played a major role in the California Indian population decline. In another act, also passed in early 1850, state legislatures legalized the white custody of Indian minors and Indian prisoner leasing, while allowing courts and juries, which remember had no Indian participation by design, to summarily reject all Indian testimony. Indian people could thus be forced into unpaid work on trumped up charges. What we're looking at here is actually an advertisement for the sale of a California Indian teenage girl of the age of 16 years old. It comes from Southern California, in the area where I live. In 1860, legislators extended that original act to legalize the indenture of any Indian. These laws, in combination, this 1850 law and this 18...
Why have you got a picture of the king on the throne?
Wait, you seem to forget to take it. You're indispensable.
China shows us what becomes possible when digital ID and surveillance, financial access, travel, speech, blacklists, and government power are all connected. These are not exaggerated claims. There may be some about China's social credit system, but I want to talk to you about their social credit system. You know, it may seem like some kind of cartoon, like out of an episode of Black Mirror, but when you strip away some of the exaggeration, the reality of what's going on in China is deeply concerning. They have databases. They have blacklists. They do surveil everywhere with AI, with facial recognition, digital payments. They restrict travel. They control speech like you wouldn't believe. They publicly shame people, for real, like with TV screens, on the streets, showing people that have broken the law. Like maybe not like a law, like not a law in the sense of, breaking the law, but socially broke a law, if that makes any sense. It's hard to even put into words since I'm not totally used to it. But they have consequences that affect normal life. For example, China will restrict your travel with the social crediting reporting. Okay.
Oh, come on.
Associated Press has reported in 2019 that would-be air travelers in China were blocked from buying 17.5 million tickets. So there was 17.5 million times where people were not allowed to buy a ticket on a plane in 1 year for social credit related offenses. They didn't break the law, but socially they just didn't act right. They didn't do what we thought. And that includes unpaid taxes and fines. It also reported that people were blocked from buying train tickets 5.5 million times. Now think about this. This is not just a fine. This is not just a letter you get in the mail that warns you. This is your ability to move. You're being affected. You're in a system. You can't even travel. That's the difference. In the old world, you could have a problem in one area of your life and still live the rest of your life somewhere else, somehow else. But a connected digital system, one issue can literally follow you everywhere. Your payment, travel, housing, your reputation, your access, your public services, your online life, everything can become connected. That's the danger. It's really happening. And China's social credit system is not one system. It's an ecosystem. Stanford's Digi China explains that China's social credit system is not exactly one single system. It's more like an ecosystem of centralized and local initiatives, state and private actors working together, consequences tied to your behavior. Researchers also have explained that one of the core mechanisms of China's social credit system is the blacklist. These blacklists can punish people for legal or regulatory violations that may fall short of criminal activity, and they can create real-world consequences. That is what people need to understand. I mean, they're doing it. So the issue isn't like, do you have a score? The issue is, can you be categorized? How can we label you? How can we flag you? And can you be blocked? Can you be restricted? Can the system decide that you're untrustworthy? Remember, unperson you. Because when that happens, your freedom becomes conditional And in a digital society, conditional freedom is not real freedom. Just isn't. What about facial recognition? The report showing how powerful China's surveillance network has become. TechCrunch has reported that Chinese authorities located and apprehended a BBC reporter in 7 minutes using CCTV and facial recognition. They were looking for him and found him in 7 minutes. Combine that with digital payments, digital ID. Combine that with a social credit, online speech tracking, travel restrictions. Combine it with AI. Combine it with super intelligent AI. And suddenly the system does not just know what you did. It knows where you are, what you said, what you bought, what you traveled, what you searched at once, who you associated with, and even what you believe. And it can do it in a second because it's AI super intelligence mixed with data centers. If that system is controlled by people hostile to the truth of the gospel, hostile to Jesus, hostile to freedom, then you begin to understand why Christians must pay attention. I bring this up because China gives us a picture of what it is, that it's possible when these systems come together. That's why these data centers matter, why these digital IDs matter, why super intelligent AI matters, and why digital wallets, all this is connected, and they matter because each piece by itself can be explained as convenient. But when you connect the pieces, you begin to see something of a much bigger picture, a world where every person can be identified, every action tracked, every purchase recorded, every movement monitored, every account flagged, every voice censored, any dissenter. I mean, literally, it is game over. It's game over. And like I said before, if it sounds extreme, I'm sorry. It does. But the Bible told us that a system like this would one day exist. So let's go to scripture, because this is where Christians, we gotta know the word. We do not interpret the Bible through the headlines. We interpret the headlines through what the Bible already told us. Okay. So when you read scripture, you realize the Bible is not behind the times. The Bible was far ahead of it all, because long before artificial intelligence and these digital currencies and data centers and smartphones or digital IDs, the Bible described a future, a system where worship and allegiance, economic control and deception, global power will all come together. And for generations, people have wondered, how could something like that even happen? I mean, people
Sorry about that. Minor problem with my StreamYard. It's getting on my nerves. You'll be glad to hear.
data centers and smartphones or digital IDs, the Bible described a future, a system where worship and allegiance, economic control and deception, global power will all come together. And for generations, people have wondered, how could something like that even happen? I mean, people said, well, back in the days with the barcode, people were talking about it. I'm sorry, but we're light years beyond some barcode. I mean, they'd be asking how a system could be so connected that they could literally restrict buying and selling. Well, I mean, now it's possible. Do you see it? How could the whole world be pressured into receiving this mark? Most people are like, no, I would never do it. Well, if you're unpersoned and if you're not grounded in Christ, if you're not willing to suffer, yeah, I could see it. I saw it with COVID. I saw how really quickly people turned on their neighbor. Didn't matter. Didn't matter if you're Christian or not. People turned on each other. This is deception at such a massive level like we've never seen in the world. And now for the very first time in human history, we're watching. It's just all up here. Here it is. Again, I'm not trying to come. Maybe I should say all this allegedly. You know, I don't want to get in trouble. I'm not trying to stoke fear. I'm just being honest. trying not to say this exact moment the mark of the beast is, but I don't know. What do you think? The Bible warned us about a world that is no longer difficult to imagine. Open up your scripture to Revelation chapter 13, verse 16 and 17. Here it is. Also, it causes all, notice that word, all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or in the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is the name of the beast or the number of its name. Again, think about what it's saying here. All, small, great, rich, poor, free, slave. This means this system reaches every level of society. It doesn't just affect the poor or the rich. It doesn't just affect one nation or one class of people. It literally reaches everybody. And then notice what it controls. Buying and selling. That means economics. That means access. That means civil participation, the ability to live normal life in the system. And this is why why we need to have discernment, because the Bible connects the end time system not only to belief, but also to economics, not just to worship, but to access, not just deception, but participation, and to society itself. This system doesn't say believe this. It says bow to this, or you will not bow, or you will not buy or sell. That is why digital ID and digital currency and AI matters. It's why these centralized control and surveillance, it's why I'm talking about it, because the technology truly exists. I mean, you might need to take time to think about this and really meditate on where we are. Like, man, the Bible's real, because we're creating a world where access can be granted, denied, flagged, frozen, tracked in real time. It should sober us up. We're not here to panic, but we need to be sobered up. We need to really open up our eyes. The Bible is real. It also tells us about where this is going to come. It's not going to come out of nowhere. It tells us that deception will increase, that false signs are going to increase. This pressure is going to continue to mount, and many people will be drawn into it because it looks powerful, safe, impressive, and necessary. I want us to go to Matthew chapter 24, verse 4 and 5. And I'm going to pull up for you also here. Matthew 24, 4 through 5. I don't know why I keep doing that, hitting that wrong button there. And Jesus answered them, see that no one leads you astray, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, meaning Messiah or Savior, and they will lead many astray. That's the first warning. The first warning that Jesus gave about the last days was not earthquakes. It wasn't a war. It wasn't famines. The warning sign was deception that's going to come. Take heed that no man deceives you. That means deception will be one of the defining marks of the age. And deception does not usually come with a warning label. Otherwise, it's not deception. It comes dressed as safety, as progress, as safe and effective and compassion. It comes dressed as convenient, as unity and peace. It says, this is good for you. This will protect you. This will make life easier, make you safe. You know, this will stop misinformation. This will stop fraud. This is going to stop all crime. And some of these things may sound reasonable. I'd love that. Great. But I'm sorry. I know who's behind the scenes, because it's the result of this world where truth is censored, people are tracked, money is controlled, and obedience is tied to a system. Then we can't be asleep. We got to wake up. We got to be prepared. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9 through 11. That's the next one I want to go to. 2 Thessalonians. Look at this. The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. Therefore, God sends them a strong delusion so that they may believe what is false. That phrase is important. They receive not the love of the truth. That means the issue is not simply that people did not have information. The issue is that they did not love the truth. That is the danger of our generation. We have more information than any generation in history, but information does not mean more truth. Just like more technology doesn't mean more wisdom, and more knowledge doesn't mean more righteousness. You can have a phone in your hand, for example, the internet in your pocket, AI answering every question, and still be spiritually blind. because truth is not ultimately found in a system or in a government or corporation. Truth is not ultimately found in artificial intelligence. Truth is found in a person. It's found in Jesus. Jesus himself said in John 14:6, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
He is the truth. I'm going to end here. Yeah. I might play some music first.
I stomped across the deck at dawn, my fury set to roar. I stomped across the deck at dawn, my fury set to roar. For every choice I thought I had was
going to reap and you're going to have a harvest and all this. That the way that the Holy Spirit is dealing with you, it's not convicting you of sin when you're out there walking after the flesh. It's convicting you of righteousness.
Yeah, 100%. If people actually read that chapter properly, you know, the conviction is that the unbelieving world is reproved of sin. Not the believers. We're not reproved, convicted of sin. We're convicted of righteousness, or how we should be walking. You know, that's hence the Holy Ghost is the comforter and teacher, not the chastiser.
Oh.
You know, yeah. But you know, I suppose most of us, when we first get saved, you know, we got the baggage of religiosity, and we think that if we do something wrong, the Holy Spirit is there, ready to strike us down with lightning and punish us and kill us and hurt us. Well, no, it's a love reproof, trying to, you know, nudge you in who you are in Christ. Again, the conviction of righteousness. So yeah, I 100% agree. The passage explains that in John. To me.